Hello and welcome to Tongue-Tied Tales. My name is Richard and right now I'm recording from a tiny, isolated and secretive island in the Arabian Gulf near Abu Dhabi. It's an island you can only reach by helicopter and no cameras are allowed. What am I doing here? I'm trying to teach English language, which is what this podcast is all about. Telling untold tales about the international English language teaching world. This is the profession that J.K. Rowling, author of Harry Potter, was part of before she got famous and happily left it all behind. As we are often the teachers who are not quite teachers. Fresh graduates, people between jobs, and those having a midlife crisis are all common in the English language teaching profession. But at the same time, I can't run this profession down too much, as I feel very lucky to be part of it. How many jobs let you work all over the world with so few qualifications and little experience like teaching English language does from the start? Just for being a native speaker in a world where English is so critical, I've been given many opportunities. Plus, many of my colleagues are non-native English teachers from countries like Poland or Spain, and often, no matter how good their English is, they have had to work twice as hard as me to get the same job, simply because I was lucky enough to have been born in London, England. Okay, how is this podcast going to work? To start with, there will be my own tales about teaching English language in countries like Japan, Spain, Italy, Oman and the UAE over the last 20 years or so. Here we will dive deep into tales like the rapid rise and scandal-filled demise of what was once Japan's largest English language teaching academy, Nova, and my own journey working for them before they collapsed in what was to be one of Japan's biggest business disasters since World War II. And then, from time to time, there'll be interview episodes where we hear the untold tales of those I have been lucky enough to meet on my travels, like an Egyptian ship captain once kidnapped by Somali pirates. And with each guest we will hear their most inspiring English tales and look at the particular issues they face with learning English depending on their background. So, let's begin this first episode where I will tell you as much as I'm permitted to about the island of Mubaraz where I live, before I introduce myself by looking at how my life as an international English teacher started in Japan at the tender age of 21. Okay, let's talk about life on a government-controlled island in the middle of nowhere. Early this morning, I took a short helicopter ride from Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE, to spend my week here on Mubaraz Island, teaching Japanese and Emirati oil and gas workers here English language. Honestly, the first time I came, I was very nervous, as I have never taken a helicopter before or worked in such an isolated, unique and controlled place. But once I arrived, I found everyone on a tiny island to be so friendly. The workers, the engineers and various geologists are all here on the island to help export oil and gas to Japan. The island was given over to Japan by the founding father of the UAE, Sheikh Zayed, in the late 1960s, and since then, every few months or so, a giant tanker drops anchor off the island before the workers here load it to the brim with oil and gas sourced from around the island for Japan. What is daily life here really like? Well, every day, whether it's Saturday or Tuesday, you work in 12-hour shifts from 6:30 to 6:30. Lunchtimes in a canteen are announced with the sound of an old World War II air raid siren. Which all adds to a unique and eerie atmosphere at times. But there is a small sandy golf course for the managers and a place to play badminton and other sports in the evenings for us lower rankers. As I said, there are no cameras allowed here, so if you want to take a modern phone, you will need to have the camera removed first. I just use an old Nokia with no touchscreen, and I don't miss social media at all. Otherwise, there are only men on the island. There are no facilities provided for women. Well, actually I'm lying, as there is a growing population of wild cats on the island. My first question was, how did the cats get here? I was told they somehow jumped on oil tankers at the port in Abu Dhabi before coming across to the island. Then my second question was, well, what happens to the cat population when it gets too high? And I was told once the cat population reaches 200 or 300, then they bring in a kind of cat napping company to catch them. And I was then finally promised that no cats are harmed in this process, that they are simply captured and taken back to civilization. To be honest, the whole island often feels like being on a James Bond villain's island at times. If you have ever seen the older James Bond movies with Roger Moore or Sean Connery as Bond, you'll know what I mean, as there are only men around and we are all dressed in identical grey or orange overalls, a bit like what mechanics might wear. Just like in those James Bond movies, where they have an island for the villain with all his henchmen. So it just seems like we're all waiting for 007 to come and stop our evil mastermind manager who wants to take over the world from this island. That feeling aside, it's really quite a beautiful place, with a shoreline filled with mangroves, the particular trees and shrubs that grow naturally along the UAE's coast. And many staff have planted trees here over the years for their fruit or scent. And you can see birds like the cormorant who nest here fairly undisturbed. And that is definitely another attraction of the island for me, the lack of distraction. I feel I now understand why people pay so much money to go on yoga retreats in remote places. Here you can really clear your mind and nights are so peaceful. Now, due to government laws, I cannot say much more or I might get in trouble. It somehow makes perfect sense that this Japanese managed island is where I am in 2023, exactly 20 years after I first started teaching English in Japan itself. This brings me to my next tale, how I started teaching English language in the first place. I was 21 and in my last year of university in the city of Southampton in England. It's always a tough year, that last year of university. You have your final exams just around the corner, and also the real world, unless you delay it by doing a master's or something, is just about to swallow you up. You have to start thinking about getting a real job and earning money. So I started to ask friends for advice. What can I do with my arts degree in English literature in history? A few of them, usually engineering students, recommended that I apply directly to McDonald's to flip burgers. Having already worked part-time at Burger King, I knew there was some truth in that. I was also getting phone calls from family members asking me directly about what I would do, and my grandmother, bless her, would say things like, "My dearest boy, I have contacts in television, don't you know? Just say the word and I'll speak to my friend and I can get you in doing anything. Okay, But I just wasn't interested. So I went to some career events at my university where companies come to attract fresh graduates to work for them. I remember there was an accountancy company with huge colourful posters trying to tell us students that young accountants were fun and were cool. The posters showed young people surfing or refereeing rugby games or something. Look, Fred is a surfer and an accountant, or look, Sarah is a rugby referee and an accountant, said the posters. I wasn't fooled though. I knew they were just working long hours in a boring office all week stuck in corporate hell. In the end, the options offered at these careers events left me feeling lost. I did apply for a business internship program though. It sounded exciting. They would train you on the job to be the next generation's business leaders, they said, but I wasn't accepted. The slick businessman running the program told me, "Well mate, at least you're doing a real university subject, aren't you?" When I asked him what he meant by this, he said, "You know what I mean, a subject you can't use in the real world, mate." Okay, fair enough. So what was left for me as a soon-to-be graduated English literature and history student? Of course, there was the real teacher option, which my mother kept recommending as a teacher herself. "It will be a great string in your bow, my darling," said my mother. But I didn't want to be a real school teacher, at least not yet, with all that marking and the responsibility of disciplining a classroom full of maniacs. That was when I realised I wanted to travel and work without too much commitment to any one career. It was around this time that I saw an advert for teaching English in Japan on the internet. It said I didn't need any qualifications beside my first degree and that I would have time to explore Japan, plus there didn't seem to be too much marking. So I went up to London for an interview. The company was called Nova, and their office had a strange-looking pink and yellow toy rabbit in the entrance. This was their mascot, Nova Usagi. Usagi meaning rabbit in Japanese. Had I done any research on the company Nova, I would have quickly discovered that they, while Japan's biggest English language school, had a fairly bad reputation with some strange rules for their often overworked teachers. I might also have discovered that there were much better options. Being unaware of all this, I did my best to get the Nova job that day in London. I told the interviewer a load of rubbish about how I had always wanted to teach English and go to Japan. At least the second fact was partly true, and I made a lot of mistakes in an English grammar test they gave me. But somehow and some way, I still got the job. They then asked me what kind of place I wanted to go to in Japan. I told them that I wanted a small town or the countryside. The Nova recruiters were happy and surprised, as all the other young teachers wanted big cities like Tokyo or Osaka. And with that job offer in my pocket, I switched off. I just was happy not to have to think anymore, and to have the answer to the dreaded question. My grandmother was there again. "Well, just what are you going to do after university with an arts degree and without my connections?" "Okay, I'm going to teach English in Japan," was my answer. And just a few months later, after I had graduated, I was on the plane from London to Tokyo. There were other newly recruited young teachers from my company on the plane, all chatting excitedly about which Japanese city they were going to work in. I remember one asking me, "Where are you going?" But I had no answer. I hadn't even checked my placement letter to see. The other teachers soon left me alone on the plane after that, as I was happy for it all to be a surprise. Soon I would be working and practicing karate in the countryside somewhere to the east of the city of Hiroshima, where I would meet the Nishimura family. This Japanese family saw me as the clueless kid I really was, and they would adopt me as their own, later forming a close bond with my own family that lasts until today. In the next episode, I will tell my tale of Japan and the story of the company Nova and Nozumu. Nozumu being the man who founded Nova in the early 1980s to quickly build an empire of close to 1,000 English schools across Japan before being imprisoned after the company collapsed in ignominy in 2007. And that's the end of today's episode of Tongue-Tied Tales. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will join me next time for the full story of Nova, Nozumu and me.